second, everyone. Working out just a couple of technical issues and then we will be on our way. Alright, hello everyone. Michael Worth WWL Leather. Welcome back. I appreciate everybody that's tuning in. Today we are going to be making a simple knife sheath for a custom knife. How many guys out there got your favorite knife, but it's very difficult for you to find a knife sheath for it? You want to protect it, carry it with you in a knife sheath, but you can never find that right knife sheath. Think about custom leather work. Some of them can be simple, some of them ornate. However, this individual had a knife custom made for himself and then ordered a knife sheath from me. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is making a knife sheath for this custom made knife. This knife was made from a horse farrier's rasp, and it's actually a very beautiful knife. It still has some of the file marks in it. Kind of gives it a nice little scale pattern. Very beautiful knife, and he wants a knife sheath for it. So, some of the tools that we're going to be using today, not very many tools whatsoever. Got them all laid out here. Some of them are a repeat because for Christmas, I got an upgrade on some of my tools from my family. Very appreciative, and I loved the kit that they got me. This is a now I can't think of what this darn thing's called. Go figure. What this tool does right here is it aligns on the edge of the leather, and it's an edge groover. There we go. And the rod on this tool aligns on the edge of the leather, and then this piece of the tool, which is adjustable, cuts a nice little groove line in there, and that's for your stitch lines, to where you can your stitches are all nice and straight when you make the holes for them. The version I have today is an upgraded version. It's a lot easier to adjust the edge, and it's also a nicer tool all around. That got me by for over 2 years. This one is going to see me through. So I got the edge groover. You always need a scratch awl. Got an edge beveler. This is number 1 because we're just softening that edge just a little bit so it's not a real sharp edge on the edge of the leather. We have a scyther. This right here, we'll get back to this one. This one you need to thin down your leather just a little bit for putting in snaps or rivets, or in general the leather's just too thick in a certain area. You use this tool, has a little razor blade in there. Show you the use on that here in just a little bit. Need a hole punch because once the knife sheath is made, it also needs a retaining strap. Don't know how much we're going to really actually be using the square today, but I always keep it with me because I always need to make a straight edge at some point or another. And then also, where'd my other one go? A pricking iron. This one's a 4-prong pricking iron. I also have a 2-prong floating around here. Here it is. A 2-prong pricking iron. These are for making the holes in the leather. When you're stitching leather, you're not forcing that needle through all those pieces of leather. You're actually pre-punching the holes. These get hit on the back with a dead blow hammer, a small one, or there's many different hammers you can use. But these punch the holes to where stitching is actually pretty easy most of the time. Need a pencil. That's for tracing your pattern onto the cardstock here. Cardstock. poster board. This is poster board. You see it all the time in the craft section at Walmart or wherever. That's all it is. Get a big sheet of it. You can make many patterns out of it. Stitching needle. Always need one of those. Today we're going to be using artificial sinew, which is this. Artificial sinew has a 70-pound per stitch tensile strength. So once you get your stitches in and everything locked down, the leather will actually tear out before your stitching does. Today we're going to do a couple other little things that I don't normally do, but it will finish it up. We're going to apply a little beeswax to the edge when we're finished, and then we're also going to use a wooden edge slicker. This right here will turn around and on the edge, instead of it being such a rough looking finish on it, which some people like, this will give it a more refined finish and have everything looking all nice and slick once it's done. And then of course you need your leather. This leather here, you can see that it has a little bit of a two-tone to it. This is just veg tan. This is roughly 8 to 9 ounce veg tan. Sorry, it's a 7 ounce veg tan. You want to use a little bit thicker leather for knives, because if it's too thin, the knife will actually cut through the sheath. I'd made a thinner sheath for that knife, for this knife before, and there's still some things with leather working that I'm learning. You gotta constantly be learning, otherwise you're just opening yourself up to mistakes. And I learned that if you use a thinner piece of leather on a knife, it will eventually slice through your knife sheath. And that happened by just putting the knife in to the sheath just a couple of times, and it sliced through past the little spacer piece that I had, and made the knife sheath pretty much worthless. Kind of funny. Worthless. Worthwhile leather. But veg tan leather, depending upon where you get it, it's a very inexpensive leather, and it can also be used for just so many projects. I've made holsters out of this. I've done coasters. I mean, belts. There's so much that can be done out of this veg tan leather here versus, say, like an upholstery grade leather. Upholstery grade leather, nice, soft, but not very right for doing something that you need rigid leather for. This is where you'll make your handbags, wallets, and all kinds of other projects. But today we're making a knife sheath, so we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Go ahead. I know I need to clean up my workstation a little bit here. When I move the camera to my counter here, you'll get a very ugly look at the sad shape of my workstation, and I need to get it all cleaned up and organized, but that's besides the point. So, veg tan leather, I'm going to move that out of the way. And we're going to start with a poster board. Pencil. And the knife. Now, folks, you're going to have to excuse me just a little bit for my camera work. I'm only operating off of one camera, so there's going to be a little bit of movement of the camera, and sometimes when I move around, I may forget that I'm blocking the camera. Feel free to make comments in the chat. I will answer them as I'm working when I notice them. If you like the content, hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel, and you'll get notifications. I know before I'd said that I am going to try and do these videos bi-weekly. However, I have a trip coming up next weekend, so I will not be able to make the trip. That's why I'm doing it this week. And then after that, I am going to try and maintain a bi-weekly schedule on this. Join me on my Facebook page at Worthwhile Leather, and I do a lot of posts and updates on there on when I'm going to do it. I actually have a full-time job that I also do, so there may be some last-minute updates or changes to my schedule. I apologize for that in advance for my subscribers. However, I got to work and pay the bills. This is a small business for me, and it doesn't pay the bills yet. So until then, I still got to work. Alrighty, so first thing we're going to do is adjust the camera down. We got the knife there on the poster board. Real simple. He wants a scabbard style knife. This is not a fold over type style. He wants a scabbard style. Scabbard style is going to be something kind of like this. This was one of my very early on projects. Just kind of messing around with some inlays and adding rivets and all that stuff. This is a scabbard style knife. The fold over or round over is when it would actually be simply folded over. But he wants a scabbard style knife. It's a very simple knife sheath to make. So we're going to get started. When you're tracing, you want to include the hilt, keeping the knife still. You trace around the knife to the hilt. Now, he wants a belt loop on his, but he wants it up here near the handle. So what we're going to do is we're going to run for the rear piece. We're simply running straight lines. That's going to cover the handle. Let's see. And that is incredibly difficult to see on the video there. So grab a pen. We're going to trace this out, make it a little bit darker. That way you folks can see it. A scabbard style or pancake style knife sheath is actually a total of 3 pieces of leather. This right here is the back piece. I ran those lines up. I know the pattern cut out right there. No big deal because it's just a straight line on up. The important thing is to get where the handle is in relation to the rest of the knife sheath. Now, if I was to just cut that pattern out right there and then stitch it together with the sandwich pieces and all that, I am now making it shorter or not as wide as what the knife is. So what you got to do is take your square, say I am using it, and I like adding a 1/2 inch to the outside of that pattern. The 1/2 inch will give me enough room to create my stitch lines, and this 1/2 inch is how wide the buffer is actually going to be, or the spacer. I keep saying buffer. The spacer, reason why you want to put a spacer in there is the blade of the knife will be on the spacer instead of against the threads. If you have a sharp knife, what would happen if the edge of that blade was constantly being put against your stitching? It's going to very quickly tear out the side of your knife sheath. We don't want that. So you got to put in a leather spacer to keep it going. Or keep the knife from cutting your stitching. I'm just making little tick marks as I go. Gives me a nice 1/2 inch all the way across. Make sure. Now when you're drawing out your pattern, it doesn't have to be exactly correct, because the important part is when you're cutting it out. Your cuts, you want to make sure are nice and straight. Some people that have been making these patterns can do it by hand. I just tried that right there. That didn't work out for me, so we're just going to line up the lines and do this all nice and straight until we get down here to the corner. Round it off just a little bit. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat. I would love to interact with the chat while I'm doing this. Kind of keeps me from feeling like I'm going crazy and talking to myself. Just working it around. And the outer line there, that is actually the pattern that we're going to cut out and put onto the leather. What we need now is we need my utility knife. There we go. They got all kinds of different knives out there that you can use for cutting leather. I prefer using just a plain simple utility knife. This one has been used on a couple of projects. I've used it on both sides already. This is one of the things I like about using utility knives. I have a dull blade. Instead of taking 15 minutes to sharpen up a blade, throw the utility knife blade away. Got a new blade right here. And I'm back to having a sharp knife. Now, when we're cutting this out, we're cutting the outside line out. And you're just cutting it on around. Nothing earth-shattering or groundbreaking here. Cut the piece out for the belt loop. There's all kinds of neat little tips and tricks from people that have been doing this a lot longer than me out there on YouTube. I highly recommend that you watch several videos before you tackle any of projects if you're new to it. They'll teach you many different styles. Here is a pattern that we're going to trace out onto the leather for the back piece of our knife sheath. I say the back piece because the front piece is not going to have the belt loop. The belt loop is a fold over piece and will get stitched on the back. One of the things that this individual requested was he would like a leg thong to be able to tie the bottom of the knife sheath to his leg. That way it stays in place when he's using it. So, very simply, there, all that we're going to do is, as soon as I find it, I say very simply and then have it out. Little hole punch. That's all it is. In that spacer piece, you are going to punch 2 holes. So you will mark them. With the hole punch. Now, somebody's going to ask, why am I putting the hole for the project inside the spacer piece, or where the spacer is going to go? Simple answer is, once this is assembled, it's going to create a pocket, and the knife slides down into the pocket. If that leather thong piece is punched inside here, the tip of your blade may actually slide in behind the thong and cut it, and then your securing strap for your leg is going to just fall off and serve no purpose. If you put the holes in the spacer piece and then you sandwich the spacer on top of them, and then the front piece, your knife blade will never touch that leg thong. There's a couple different ways of doing it. As I go along, I may change it. Right now, I plan on punching holes. I might change it up and just stitch it on there instead. We'll just have to wait and see. Next, we are going to transfer our cardboard pattern onto the piece of leather. Now, you never want to waste leather because it can be a little expensive. So, what you do is you find the best layout, and by placing it here, I can actually extend this belt loop portion up higher than what the pattern is. And then for the front piece, there is still enough leather left over for the front piece. And then I have enough over here that will create my spacer. So placement of your pattern placement is very, very important. Once the leather is on the pattern, now I am going to use my scratch awl and simply trace out my pattern onto the leather. From there, since that I want this piece to run all the way up, I'll take my square again, line it up with the line, and run it up. I'll do that on both sides. Okay, from there, the reason reason why that strap, or the belt loop strap, is as long as what it is because I need some of the leather to actually be a reinforcement on the back side of the knife. So my fold over is actually going to start about halfway up that fold over, and then the belt will slide in between them. There's the knife. Now I'm back to my utility knife to make these cuts. And seeing that I got to be a little sparingly with how I cut this, I am going to have to go very slow. And I just cut. I don't apply much pressure. I cut right along that edge. I just kind of score it on the first time around. Second time, with the blade still being very sharp, I cut the rest of the way through the leather. I found that it also helps that when you get to the end, rotate your piece around, start at your transition point, at your corner. That will give you a nice clean cut through all the way down. Sometimes little leather fibers want to hold on, so I'll slide the knife all the way through while I'm holding it and just kind of let it fall until it meets resistance, and then cut it down again. If you're cutting this by hand, you do want to go very slow. They make leather shears out there that can make this project a little bit easier. But you also lose some control. I need to get some better lighting on the shop so I can see these lines a little bit more clearly. You want to go slow, and you're just tracing that line, so you're not applying much pressure at all. And without applying much pressure, using a sharp blade, I actually got a single pass cut through. That's what I meant by the fold over. Now, I got a little bit of cleanup work to do on this because you can tell that the edges don't exactly match up. That's fine, that's just a little cleanup work at the end of it. This is the back piece. The back piece has your belt loop. For the front piece, you take the exact same pattern and you simply cut your belt loop off. Now there's other leather workers out there that are looking at that going, you destroyed your pattern. Well, in some degrees yes, and others not really. This is custom work for a custom project to begin with. How many knife sheaths am I going to make for a handmade knife? So this is a pattern for the front piece that will go over there. Cutting this one out next, and then we're going to still do more cutting on that to get the spacer. Put the leather back up. Put your pattern on here using good management or space management. We're going to trace that pattern out again. Got it traced out onto the leather. Now we're going to cut. Cut it nice and slow. When you're cutting your front piece out, that is your show piece. That is the piece that you want to end overall look the best. That is the piece that you want all your lines to definitely be straight. Got your front piece. Back piece, front piece. Belt loop. If I was to stitch that down right now, we'd be able to get the knife in there. The leather would take form to it. However, the knife would be, the blade edge would constantly be cutting on your stitching, and it wouldn't take very many cycles of the knife being put into your sheath before it is done, popped all your stitching, and your knife sheath is useless. Put that up just a little bit right there. So what you need is a spacer piece to stitch all your pieces together, and also so the blade of your knife doesn't cut your stitching, but it also creates a nice little pocket for your knife inside its sheath. That 1/2 inch that I put around the outside here, that is the template for your spacer. So now we are cutting the inside line of your template. And that is the template that you need for your spacer. When you're tracing the spacer out on leather, you got to make sure that you're holding tight to it, because what will happen is you may turn around and inadvertently bend this in, and then you end up with a spacer that's not properly sized for your knife. So what I like to do is keep at least 4 fingers on it over the area that I am tracing. Once I get to my fingers, I just keep sliding them down. Once I get to my fingers down here at the corner, it's okay to move your fingers on around the corner and make the corner and one smooth go. Using my thumbnail, bringing it on around. One of the other ways to do it, I don't, unless I am dyeing the project, is you can simply trace this with a pencil or pen and then follow your trace line from the pencil or pen on around here. You have to trace this all the way around to get your spacer. You're essentially creating a U or a V for your knife sheath. I don't like using a pen or a pencil unless I am going to dye it, because on this natural color, that pencil mark will actually stand out. But I guess with this being a spacer and actually closed, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because nobody's ever going to see this piece except for the side. But the theory holds true for the front and back piece. And the person that ordered this, they want to keep the natural color of the leather. On all the products that I've made this person, he always likes the natural color of the leather. He's ordered several holsters, and almost all of them have been the natural color. Now, this spacer piece, if you end up cutting it a little bit wide on the outside, that's fine, because we're going to turn around and we're going to shave that down to make sure everything lines up when we put all these together. On the inside piece, you want to make sure that you do not cut it wide on the inside of anything, because it is directly matched up to the size of the blade. If you're going to cut it just a little bit off from your line, make sure you cut it towards the outside, because it's okay if there's a little bit more room in there for the blade to slide down, but not less. And now we have our spacer piece. Real simple. Now, a couple of things that we are going to do before we assemble this is, one, we're going to test to make sure that the knife fits inside there nicely, like it's supposed to. That's going to be a good looking sheath when it's finished. Everything fits up right, so I do not have to restart this project. That's a good thing. I hate restarting, especially when I'm live streaming. It makes me look like a fool. And I do that plenty enough on my own. I don't need no additional help. And I have decided that we are actually going to stitch the leg strap on there. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a strap from a previous project, strap cutter, that is going to be a leg thong. We are going to stitch this on the back side of the back of his knife sheath. By stitching it, I feel that it will actually be more secure back there than by punching the holes and running it through, because I don't have a whole lot of material back there to work with. So, 4-prong hole punch. Join me over here at my pound board, which is over there in the corner. Dead blow hammer. Back piece has holes in it. Not to worry, because they will never be seen. Some artificial sinew and my thread snips. Don't need a very big piece, so not too worried about it. Let's adjust the camera back to the project. And put that needle over here somewhere. Where did it go? You know, I really need to get one of those little magnetic trays over here. That way I can just toss my needles in there. Ah, there it is. When I need it. Once again, people, if you're enjoying the content, hit the like button. Subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment. Join in the chat. We're just going to stitch this around. Excuse me one second, I just thought of something. Okay. Tried being a little bit more organized this time when I started, but one of the things I failed to check on was the audio. I just wanted to make sure that the audio is working and you guys could hear me. Worthwhile Homestead. Thank you for the wave. Thank you for saying hello. Anybody else watching, feel free to join in the chat. If you didn't know, my lovely wife puts videos on Facebook for Worthwhile Homestead. Kind of her start with that is actually what led me to doing the leather work. So, go to her Facebook page, Worthwhile Homestead. Be sure you drop a like. Follow her. She always puts out some really good tips on many different subjects. Whether it's animal care, gardening, or canning, all the stuff that deals with being a little bit more self-sufficient. Can be found on her Facebook page. Worth Your While Homestead. All that I'm doing here is I am truing up this piece. All these cuts, if they're a little bit rough, don't get discouraged because they can all be fixed in the end. Now we're going to do our fold over for belt loop. For that, I'll be back over here at the pounding board. Follow me. Right over there. I know you can't see it very well over there, and I apologize. I will eventually pick up another camera. I also need my little 2-prong hole punch. You guys are wondering why I only have a 2 and a 4 hole pricking irons? The answer to that is simple. I chose a 4 because 3 is not enough and 5 is too many. And I chose a 2 because 3 is too many and 1's not enough. Now the real reason behind that is simply because the 2-hole prong punch, you use that for whenever you're turning corners or you're very close to the edge and you only need 1 more hole. You place one of the prongs in the previous hole, that keeps your spacing, and then you can rotate it to either turn the corner or get that last hole in before the edge. And then the 4-hole 4-prong punch. That's for when you got a whole bunch of straight holes that you got to make, and covers more ground a little bit faster. One of the things that I've noticed, and I know that my punches could probably deal with a little bit of sharpening there on the points, but one of the things that I've noticed is the more prongs that you have, the harder that you have to hit it to get it to punch through your leather. And if you're having to use too much force, that is when your tool can bend or blow out the side of a project because you're hitting it too hard and you can't guide it as much, you can't finesse it. So that's why I use the 2 and 4 hole prong punch. Then I back stitch 1. Clip it. And then singe and melt the ends. You'll see on several videos out there where people just back stitch a couple of times and then they cut their stitching just as close to the hole as they possibly can, or even down inside the hole. I don't like that approach because though it stays secure for quite a while, it runs a possibility of eventually backing out, and that's when you end up with that one loose thread out there. So I always singe mine, melt them, because it creates a little bit of a wider flat head and the stitching will not fall back through the hole and come unraveled on you. So now we have our belt loop, we have our leg thong, now we need to apply our spacer. When you're applying the spacer, line it up on one side. Take your scratch awl. Go ahead and just scratch the inside just a little bit. We're not doing it for a full mark. It doesn't have to be seen that well. Keeping it lined up on the outside. What you're marking here is your glue line. Somebody might be like, what's your glue line? I am still going to be stitching this together. However, to keep everything in place while it's being, the holes are being punched into it and all that stuff, I use contact cement, as do most leather workers, to keep your pieces together. A lot of leather workers, however, if they glue it, they do not stitch it. I do not trust just plain old glue, no matter what it is. I have never had this glue come apart on me or anything, but I like the idea of having this stitching to make sure it doesn't butterfly out or eventually come undone. So, we got our glue line on where we're going to be gluing on our piece here. But before we do that, we actually need to seal the leather. Forgot about that. By sealing the leather, you're making it more weather resistant. I say weather resistant, not weatherproof. You can get these little cotton daubers. That's all that they are. These are great for staining or gluing or pretty much whatever wet work you got to do with leather, these things work fine. I also use the little 1-inch foam brushes, but this is currently my gluing brush and I am out. I need to pick up some more, so I'm using little cotton puff balls. What I am sealing this with is just plain and simple satin sheen. It is a leather finish. All that it does is it like puts a little coating over the leather that makes it weather resistant, water resistant, sweat resistant. Once you got your little coating on, go ahead and wipe it down, wipe it off. If you let it dry, it's like taking your car to the car wash but not getting the spot-free rinse. It will leave little spots all over. The inside piece, it's not as important to get all the way around or evenly because it's never going to be seen. The outside piece, on the other hand, it's very important to get everything done. And what it will do is it will darken up the leather just a little bit as well. So now we'll do the suede side, the back side, because that will probably be one of the parts that get the sweatiest. I'm not concerned about the leather thong because it's a thong piece. It's not really required for that. Probably should have done this before I folded that over. In fact, I would highly recommend that you do. Do this part before you fold it over. Okay, so we are on our way still. When you're using any type of liquid around leather, when you're finished using it, always cap it. If it has a cap, use it. The reason why is because you can see my workstation right here, though it's not the cleanest. I've watched several videos of clean workstations where the individual has turned around and dumped by bumping their leather die, and then it goes to a cutscene, and then they talk about how they had to redo their project. That's the wrong piece. Edge beveler on the back side here. Just going to take it around, knock that leather off just a little bit, make it a little bit more smooth. Not doing it on the inside piece because the inside piece is not ever going to be seen or felt. except for up here on the belt loops. Once again, something that I probably should have done before assembly. And all that did is round off the edges just a little bit so it's not a little sharp edge. Okay. Moving on. Our spacer. We are now going to apply glue and put our spacer in place. A little contact cement. To use contact cement properly, after you apply it, you let it dry for a couple minutes. So while that's drying, we're going to put our glue line on this other piece because we will not have access to the spacer here in just a minute. You won't be able to see it on camera, but there is a glue line on there. While we're working on that, we're going back to the sealer. We're going to seal this piece. Real simple, just sealing it where the knife is. Turn it over. We don't got to worry about wiping the suede side down. This side here, we will be wiping down. Apply the leather finisher very thoroughly over the outside piece. And now we wipe it down. Now, you guys remember the two-tone of the leather before, where some of it was darker than others? Look at it now. That two-tone, though it's still there, it's quite not as prominent, and it's turning into a nice piece. Cap. Always got a cap. And now we're gluing the spacer to put on here. There's all kinds of little tidbits about gluing and how to do it. Let that piece dry. Some of the tidbits with gluing is you want to be careful around the edges, because if you're dyeing or staining, the glue along the edge will affect the stain. The leather won't absorb the glue in that particular area very well. Give it just a couple of seconds. Sorry for some of the background noise. We got rain coming in right now, and got a tin roof on my shed, so some of that rain noise may be coming through. I'm not sure. But all in all, shouldn't be too bad. Guys in chat could have told me that I didn't put the lid over my glue. That is one of the worst things to spill. Gave it a couple seconds. Got kind of tackiness to it. The glue's trying to stick to my finger, so when I apply this, I apply it as close to the edge as I can get. I just use my fingers to apply the pressure, keep it lined up all the way around. Just a little trim to do. Right there. Makes it all nice and neat. Then once again, before I get too far along in the project, lay the knife down inside there. And you can see how the knife fits in there perfectly, like it should, because I trace that spacer to the knife. Now we're going to glue the top piece to the rest of the assembly. That time I got in too much of a hurry when I capped it and didn't glue the other piece. People watching, I appreciate you staying through and watching this. Like the content, be sure to hit the like button. If If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. Check me out on Facebook, Worthwhile Leather. Spelled W-I-R-T-H. No, it's not spelled wrong. That's just my name. And now we're applying the top piece. When you do the top piece, there is room for error and forgiveness. We already know that the bottom piece and the spacer are correct. So when the top piece goes on, anything that does not line up exactly, it's okay, because we will go through and trim and sand and then finish. So, pull out some of my little clips here. These clips, nothing more than the metal paper clips. Buy them at the Dollar Tree. They apply a good amount of pressure to the leather for the glue. Doesn't take too long, but sometimes I don't have enough hands or fingers, so I'll use my metal clips. And we're on our way. Now, though I don't have any more movement because the glue is already dry, the glue is still not fully seated, settled, seated, cured. Take your pick. The glue's not done. So I am not going to pound my holes or any of that stuff yet, because that's one of the biggest purposes of gluing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all my little overlaps. And this is done using your utility knife. Pretty much what you're doing is you're tracing the back piece all the way around to where the back and the front match up exactly the same. See, I had a little piece of the glue let go on the tip down here. So that tells me this is not ready for all the finish work yet. We're just shaving this down just a little bit here. Not taking much, but we're creating a nice smooth edge. And this can only be done if your blade on your knife is sharp. It's a little like whittling. Well, I really can't say that. I really haven't whittled anything. Okay, now, after shaving down the sides like that, what's happened is the top edge of the leather here has gotten just a little bit of a curl in it. Now it looks like it's trying to come apart. It's not, it's just where it got soft. Going back to the edge beveler, we're going to bevel that edge, and that will eliminate that little curl. But anybody have any questions or comments or anything about what we've covered so far? I would love to interact with the chat. That's one of the reasons why I do the live broadcast of some of my projects, is to answer questions. Because if I was just doing a video, I wouldn't have to do that live. I could do that whenever. Okay, we got the edge nice and beveled. We'll probably have to do that again here in just a moment. Now, you can take that to a sander, or there's other tools that they make to smooth that out, square it up with the other pieces. Ladies, you may know what that is. Just a plain simple fingernail file. Run it up and down the sides. Kind of roughs up that leather just a little bit. Smooths everything out. This right here is just pretty much finished work. We're still going to have, I don't know, a little while of stitching. But got that edge all nice and roughed up. We'll go ahead and run that edge beveler along there one more time. Just make sure that we didn't create a little bit of a curl. We'll do the back side. We'll do both sides here.
Oh, cool. I brought somebody to come on, but
Oh, I just got done with it. What do you think?
it is called the Winter Berries headband.
Ooh, I like it.
My wife and daughter are in my wife's craft room. They happen to share a wall, so they may carry over just a little bit. Don't pay them any mind, because the important information is coming from me. Okay. Take everything that you learned from me, and well, now it's what? $1.50, and you could buy a Coke. Okay, we got our edge beveled, sanded. Everything's all shaped up, ready to go. The glue has had time to cure and dry. So now we're going to make our stitch lines. Use our edge groover. I am using my new one. This one is a much cheaper model. It works fine. Nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's a little bit more, this one's a little bit more user friendly. So for the stitch line, put that back down. You take the bar of the tool and you adjust it to where you want it to be, and then you tighten it down. Very simple, easy to use. You put that bar along the edge of the leather. Now, to me, that first stitch is going to be too close to the leather or too close to the edge, so I'm going to lengthen that bar out just a little bit. Check again. I like that much better. So, we're going to, all it does is just like with the scratch awl, it just leaves a little line, and that line will be for where I put my stitch holes. Take it all the way up. We'll see if we can see this on camera here. See how I put that line in there? That will give me my reference I need to make sure that my stitch holes are lined up. Now, this part's going to take me a little while over here at the pound board, but please stay with me. Feel free to ask any questions. Okay. Pounded out all the holes. Some of them are going to be a little more difficult because they went through 4 pieces of leather. So what I will do is I will go through, run my scratch all through those holes to make sure that the holes I need to stitch through went through enough not to give me problems to slide the needle and sinew through. I should probably actually do that with all of them because some of them look like they don't want to cooperate all the way through. Okay, now for the super fun and exciting part. Stitching. Several different ways of stitching this. To find out how much thread you need, because you do this in one go, you just line your thread around where you're stitching. And depending upon how many layers of leather you're going through, it's trial and error at this point. You can get away with not one length, not 2 lengths, my personal favorite is 3, and then I add a little extra, almost 4. If you go 4 lengths, you will not run out of thread before you finish your project. However, you will start accumulating an excess amount of waste. I have found that at about 3.5 or so, depending upon how much leather I'm going through, is about correct. So, for about the next, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, I'm going to be stitching this. Since that I'm going to be stitching it so long, I'm going to have a seat right over here. And my little seat. And get to stitching. I'm not going to cover how I stitch per se, because there are plenty of videos out there that show you how to stitch leather. I call this one the lazy saddle stitch. Saddle stitching takes 2 needles and a sewing pony or a 3rd arm. I don't have a sewing pony, so I don't do that. I start the first stitch, I make 1 stitch, back it up 1 time, go through again, and then I start with the rest of them. I go all the way down and around, and then I come back. I will end on the same hole that I started, and then I back stitch 1. That way my end stitch is right there next to each other, and then I go from there. I will try and make this as fast as possible. This is one of the most boring parts of leather working. unless you're watching me get all tangled up and laughing hysterically, then I guess it'd be alright. If you guys have any questions, suggestions, or projects that you want to see in the future, leave a comment. I will read them all. And it will also help prepare me for my other videos that I plan on doing. Sit here and just talk a little bit about my leather working. When I started this, I said that my wife starting the homestead was kind of how I got my start in leather working. People might wonder how that came about. Well, we wanted to be a little bit more self-sustaining, so my wife wanted to plant a garden and do canning and stuff like that. We got chickens for eggs and all that stuff. Well, we got to looking into meat rabbits. We found out that a actually relatively small amount of rabbits on a proper breeding schedule will actually give you more meat at the end of the year than if you were to raise a cow. And it's at a fraction of the cost. Well, I know how to tan rabbit hides to a little degree. I've learned a bunch since we started this. But I figured some rabbit skin moccasins would be really fun and nice to make and wear. Maybe even sell a couple. So I got to looking around and I found a leather store that sold leather. I watched some videos. And while watching a bunch of different videos, I discovered a couple of people that I really enjoyed watching. They taught me a lot. I highly suggest Weaver Leathercraft videos with Chuck Dorsett. He does an excellent job. High energy man, and he keeps his videos very entertaining and moving along at a fast pace. And then also Don Gonzalez from Gonzalez Saddlery. He makes custom saddles, but he also uses his scraps to make purses and wallets and all that stuff. And the man is an absolute artist when it comes to leather art and the hand stamping. I learned a lot by watching him do that. Those people there putting out the videos that they do, you can learn a lot, and it will also help you broaden your horizons on projects they don't cover, but it will give you an idea on how to work leather to do projects. So back to the original story. Got the leather, and as I sat down at a kitchen table, was getting ready to make my first cut, I'd watched a bunch of different videos on how to make the rabbit fur-lined moccasins, and I thought, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that project. However, a simple tote bag I could probably handle. So I made my wife a simple tote bag purse. And then she asked if it could have a cell phone holder, so that one turned into my daughter's simple tote bag purse. And I made my wife one with a cell phone holder on the side. And there became the addiction. I've created my first project. It was for my wife and for my daughter. They could have been lying to me, but they told me that they enjoyed it. So I'd have to take them at their word. but they may not have wanted to hurt Daddy's feelings, so. Regardless, I watched more videos. That's when I found Don Gonzalez's videos and his artwork. So I got the proper tools I needed for some of that work. There were so many stamping tools. And I was tinkering around with some artwork that somebody happened to see as they walked by and thought it looked pretty cool and asked if I was selling what I was working on. And individual I was with took command of the situation. I was making a coaster. I was just hand stamping some artwork on there. The guy I was with said, yep, he sells them 1 for $15 or 2 for $20. I was thinking a $15 coaster. Who's going to pay that? The guy said, I'll take 2. And I had my first order. It took me 2.5 months after that first order before I was finally caught up on all my coaster orders. He showed them around to everybody, and everybody was wanting leather coasters. And that was the start of Worthwhile Leather. From coasters, I started making some dog leashes. I was working a second job in a canine unit out by my primary job. Was in need of some leashes, and one of the dog handlers had ordered a coaster from me, and he gave the owner my number, and the owner called me up and told me he needed some dog leashes and collars, and he needed them quickly. And that was my first professional customer, and from there I branched on to several other places, making keychains. I'll put somebody's logo on a keychain and walk into their business. I give them their keychain. It's theirs. Give them my sales pitch. Sometimes I walk out with an order. Sometimes I don't. But custom work is where it seems like I get the most orders from. If you go to my Facebook page, you will see a bunch of my work. Not all of it, but a bunch. And this is the tedious part of leatherworking. I have my sewing machine back here that I could have used on this. However, I got some new tools that are for hand stitching, and I wanted to give them a shot. Otherwise, this video would done be over and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you fine people. Here very shortly, I'll be finished with this side. The way back goes a little bit faster because I don't have to look for the holes. Like that one. Before I started streaming my videos right about now, while I'm doing all this, I'd be on YouTube, probably watching or listening to a video, that or Netflix. Just a little something extra to take my time off the work. Sometimes you'll run into some holes that are a little tighter on the way back because it already has stitching through it. Once again, anybody watching, if you got any ideas or suggestions for other videos that you'd like to see, please leave comments and I will get that worked out. Once I reach 100 subscribers, I will be doing a free giveaway. I will work out the details on how I'm going to do that. But once I reach 100 subscribers, I'm going to do a live stream of a project. And the winner will receive that project once I reach 100 subscribers. So, by all means, hit the subscribe button. And help me out. I think I figured something out here. There we go. Let's see. 2:43. All right. We're making good time. People sticking around through all this, I appreciate it. Giving me somebody to talk to besides myself. This is just very tedious work. Like I said in my earlier video, leather working is not difficult. It's just time consuming. You gotta have a little bit of patience. to get through it. Now most of the time I will double stitch these, but for the sake of the stream I am not going to stream the second set of stitching. I'm going to go ahead and put a finish edge on this product on stream, and then we'll call it a day. I will show you that the knife sheath works as intended. And then you folks can get about your normal day. We're approaching the end of the stitching. And that's what happens when you start running short of thread. It starts wanting to come out on you. Any bets on if I'm going to be able to finish this with the amount of thread I have? Any takers? Do my back stitch. Boy, that was so close. Warned everybody about not cutting your thread too short when you're pulling it out. And I was literally at the end of my rope or thread. Melt the ends down. Alrighty, we have our stitching in. It is stitched. For all intents and purposes, this sheath could be finished at this point right here. Knife inserts in. Looky there. That is a beautiful knife scabbard, knife sheath. For those of you watching, if you agree with me, hit the like button. Now, the form of the knife is complete. We've seen that it works. So now we're going to pretty up the edges of everything. Like I said, I don't normally do this because a bunch of people like kind of that rustic homemade look. However, this individual has kind of given me free reign on it. And I got all these neat little new tools, thanks to my loving family, loving and supportive family, that I am going to give it a try. A little bit of beeswax. You don't melt it, but you heat it up a little bit to make it soft. Rub it along the edge. Warm that up just a little bit more.
She said she wanted to stay home, but I can tell her to do. I'll tell her she needs to come then. She wanted to stay home, you stinker.
Okay. Now, we got a little bit of a waxy edge to that. Now we use our wooden slicker. And we just apply a little bit of friction to everything. Friction causes heat. Heat melts the wax. And the pressure forces all of those little grains of leather and leather hairs to lay down and stay. Apply just a little bit more. And I wish you guys could feel this through the video, but that edge that used to be all nice and rough has been laid down so smooth that it feels just like the grain of the leather. Knife goes in. One of my belts. Through the belt loop. Thong ties around the leg. Why? Because he wanted it. And who am I to judge? And that is a simple knife scabbard. Folks, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. Like I said, if you like the video, hit the like button. Like the project, hit the like button. Don't like the video, hit the thumbs down button. If you have any suggestions for future projects, for future streams, please leave them in the comments down below. And once I reach 100 subscribers, I'm going to live stream a project and do a free giveaway at the end of that stream. That did turn out rather nice, if I do say so myself, and I do. So please tell your friends, tell them to subscribe. I'll be doing this every 2 weeks. You can also find my Facebook page at Worthwhile Leather on Facebook. They'll get a chance to see some of the other projects that I've made. Here in the near future, we'll probably be doing a guitar strap, some holsters, purses, wallets. I do a little bit of everything. I'll also go into a little bit more in depth on a beginner set of tools that people can buy. There's videos out there, people watch them. And if you're into the leatherworking, watch the videos out there. I suggested 2 people. They do great work, but I have also learned from a bunch of other videos out there as well. So until next time, I appreciate you watching. Thank you.